Welcome to week 8, day 36 of the fall 2024 Programming Fundamentals with C Sharp. I'm Jim Kaufman with Rankin Technical College. Today we're going to be covering, we're going to walk through the chapter 14, 15 hands-on test real quick. I did want to kind of touch upon when and why to use an interface versus a class. Obviously, with in our hands-on tests and labs, if it says to use an interface or a class, you use that. But I just kind of want to touch upon, you know, just give everyone a little more idea of, in the real world, if you're working on a project somewhere and you're designing a system, why would you choose an interface as opposed to, a class? So just kind of want to go through that a little bit. I'm going to walk through chapter 7 and 10 labs real quick. I did want to just kind of touch upon revisit the exception example I showed yesterday. And then also I'm going to go ahead and lecture over chapter 10, just some additional window forms and controls. So let's go ahead and look at the hands-on test. So hands-on test, not bad here. It's just one exercise. You're going to be creating an interface called iLoan, right? And you're going to have a couple of methods: make payment and apply interest. And then you're going to have some properties: name, type, and balance. Just recall, with the interface, you do not have an implementation here generally. I know that in earlier versions of the C# programming language, you could not have any methods that had a concrete implementation of the method, right? You only had just the basic declaration of the method, and you had to override it. In later versions, that's not true, but for our purposes, we're just going to be kind of looking at it more from the perspective, more of a traditional type setup where you just you declare the methods, but you don't implement anything in the interface. And you will be implementing them in the classes, which are going to implement the interface. So here you've got a short-term loan and a long-term loan. And whenever you implement an interface, you're going to have to provide concrete implementation of these methods, okay? And include the name, type, and balance as well. I do want to maybe touch upon just a little bit. I was talking about when to use an interface in a class. In this case, I don't know. This would maybe be even better as having a base class than inheriting it. But if we had different kinds of loans, let's say we had student loans and home loans. There's all kinds of different loans that the complexity is much more, and they're not very similar. In some cases, some loans are not very similar at all. And when that's the case, a lot of times when you have similar type objects, when you have classes that are not similar, I should say, when you have classes that are not really similar to each other much, a lot of times that's when you kind of use an interface. And in the interface, you just have some certain things that you want all the loans to make sure they implement, right? And so that's when it's called a contract between the interface and the class, right? Always think of interfaces as you're having a contract between the interface and the class, and so the class has to provide implementation of certain methods and other properties as well. Okay, we'll touch upon that here a little bit more. But in this case, obviously, you're just creating an interface, and you're going to have two classes: one short-term loan and one long-term loan. Not too complicated here. I don't know if there's really much to go through here. Just make sure you read the grading here. When the load is paid off, an appropriate message should be displayed to the user. The UI displays the error message if the user enters a negative loan amount. The UI displays all monetary amounts as currency, and the iLoan interface as described above. Okay. And then also you've got a short-term class and a long-term class. So make sure that the fields of the name and balance of the loan. Obviously, if when you implement it, it's going to force you to have that, right? It's going to force you. It'll give you an error if you don't. Has a constructor initializes all fields. Has properties for name, type, and balance. Implements the make payment and implements the apply interest. And that's pretty much the same thing for long-term loans here, long-term as well. So I don't think that this is too much of a problem for anyone. Obviously, if you did the labs, this should not be too difficult for you. Yeah, I did want to show you a quick example here on vehicle. So I have this interface called vehicle. Interface called iVehicle, right? And it's an interface. And then I created some other objects here that implement this interface. And I have a motorcycle, a car, and a boat. And this is where I just kind of wanted to discuss a little bit, maybe like in this situation, this is like a good situation to, to maybe use an interface where, the relationship between a boat, a car, and a motorcycle, they're very much different, right? And in cases like this, sometimes that's when you kind of want to use, use interfaces. When you're talking about maybe like just cars, you have different kinds of cars. Maybe you have Toyota, you have different cars. Cars are very similar. Most cars you're gonna have four wheels, stuff like that. There's a lot of similarities between cars, and then that way, maybe you would have just a base class that you would inherit from, and then you create other car objects, right? Car objects very similar to each other. Whereas here, vehicle is the interface here, and different types of vehicles. And a boat is very much different than a car and a motorcycle, right? So in this case, you kind of can see that maybe they're a little bit more unrelated. So maybe this is a situation where you would have an interface as opposed to a base class. So I just kind of want to point that out, and we can take a quick look at this here. Because we haven't done much on interfaces. There's only really that one lab that had you create an interface. I think the Pokemon card one. So here's this interface that's been created, and you just have two methods: start and stop engine. Notice there's no implementation here. You ended in a semicolon, right? Same here. You're just doing some basic a make, a model, and a year. Properties, and then so within the different classes, here's car, you're overriding the start engine method. You're providing what's called a concrete implementation of the start engine method, right? And it's just doing a write, it's just doing a write. Did want to point out, let's just comment this out. So if you're not aware of this already, so if I comment this out, the editor is going to give you an error. Car does not implement the interface member, right? So you do that on any of these different members, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to tell you that you need to provide a implementation of all the different members that were defined within the interface. So basically the only difference between the car, boat, and the motorcycle in this case is it's, we're just overriding the methods here and saying what kind it is. Obviously, in the real world, it's going to be much more, There's going to be much more to it than that, right? Different types of engines. You have two wheels on a motorcycle, you know, so much more complicated as far as that's concerned. But this is just a simple little example, just to kind of demonstrate that. And I guess we can run this just for the heck of it. So here you've got the car engine starting and stopping, same with the motorcycle and also the boat as well. Okay. So really the important thing here was just kind of just kind of wanted to touch upon the idea of an interface, and in some cases why that makes more sense than maybe just having a base class that you inherit from. Okay. So let's walk through chapter 7 and 10 on the labs. So the first labs is a BMI application and body mass index, and you're just doing some different data validations here, right? So if the user does not enter a number for their weight, then display invalid weight in red. And it's also telling you make sure that you handle format exceptions. So if for some reason they entered something that cannot be converted, right, into a number. So if somebody enters a letter in a field, right? If you enter a letter in a field, you're going to have a format exception. If the user enters a weight of less than 70 pounds and more than 300 pounds, then display invalid weight in red. If the user does not enter a number for their height, then display invalid height in red. And saying also make sure you handle the format exception. If the weight and height are valid, then display the calculated BMI and category. For this, you've got the UML. Obviously starts with a dash. You know these are private. Here you've got BMI with the same name as the class, so you know this is the constructor. Then you have some public methods, weight pounds, height inches, BMI, and weight category. So here you're actually creating a static class. And if you recall, a static class cannot be instantiated. So you're going to create a static class called BMI calculator. And inside that static class, you're going to have a static method called calc.bmi. So to access that, as long as make sure you make it public. So when you can access that calculator from within your BMI class, you do BMI calculator, the name of the class, dot the name of the method, calc.bmi, and then pass in all the variables, right? Pass on all the parameters here, right? Well, weight in pounds and height in inches, right? So you're just going to pass those in, and that this here will calculate that. But when you're calling this, you're going to do BMI calculator dot calc BMI. You don't do a new, right, BMI calculator because it's static. It belongs to the class. Cannot be instantiated. Okay. You got an enum here. And here you're creating two different exceptions. You're creating an invalid weight exception and an invalid height exception. So, and obviously it inherits, right? Is going to inherit. So it's going to inherit from the system argument exception. All right. So this is one of the .NET system exceptions that are available, and okay, and system argument exception actually ends up also inheriting from system.exception, right? This is just showing, so you're not creating this, right? This is already available within .NET. This is just showing you that you're going to create two new exceptions called invalid weight and invalid height, and both of those exceptions are going to inherit from the argument exception, okay? And it's just kind of showing you, you're also going to be using this system.format exception, right? Because up above here, it talks about the format exception. And basically that's when you enter something and it cannot create a number from it, right? If you enter a number, you'll be able to create a number. If you enter a letter, it's not going to be able to create a number, and it's going to be a format exception, right? So you need to handle that. So you need to, if that throws that, you need to catch that, okay? The next one here is order exceptions. Create a GUI application to check that orders are valid. So you have some ranges, and this is going to be, so the item number can be anywhere between 100, including 100, and 999. So inclusive, right? Including 100 and including 999, anywhere in between there. And then quantity, same, inclusive, anywhere between 1 and 12. And then estimated delivery, anywhere between 1 and 30 inclusively. All right, I believe it says inclusive on this. Inclusive, yes. Item number, okay, all three of those. And basically, you're just going to click the validate button. It's going to be order is valid or order is not valid, right? Here you've got three different exceptions. You're creating an invalid item exception, invalid quantity exception, invalid delivery days exception. And similar to the previous lab, you're just going to inherit from the system argument exception, right? You're not going to inherit, I think the stuff we looked at yesterday, just inherited from exception, but you're going to inherit from the argument exception, right? Which the system argument exception is a derived class from system.exception, right? Here's your order. You got three private variables here, three instance variables. You've got your constructor, all right? And then you've got your properties. Your three properties here, which are all public. Pretty basic. What you've done multiple times already as far as converting a UML to code. If the constructor setter attempts to input an invalid value, throw the appropriate exception. So when you're going to throw the exception, and then you're going to probably just turn around and catch that exception. In the real world, some things are handled a little differently in that, how you kind of propagate an exception up. We're just using maybe a couple different methods, what we're doing here. And in a more complex system, sometimes you just keep on pushing, we'll talk about that later, pushing the exception up the ladder, so to speak, and it gets caught at a different spot within your application, but I don't want to confuse things. So in most cases here, we're going to throw an exception, and then we're going to turn around and catch that exception, and then send a message back to the user. Okay, here we've got a login exception. Make sure they entered the correct login and credentials. And so here you're got an account object. You're creating a bank form. And a bank form always inherits from the system windows.form, right? And here you've got three exceptions: no user password, incorrect password, and account disabled. And here's one where it's not using that. The previous two labs were doing the argument exception. This is just using the base system exception. So you're going to inherit just from this one. Okay, and this is going to tell you if either the username or password are not entered, Then you will throw the no user password exception, and etc. here. You can read through that obviously yourself. If the account is disabled, okay. Return the account if the username or password is both correct and the account is not disabled. Okay. And this one's decoder ring. Yeah, I don't see anything too complicated here either. You're just going to have one exception, invalid character exception. So that's that. Let's look at that exception here. This one here. So probably in a lot of these labs, probably what you're going to end up doing is you're going to end up. So this is just a normal divide by zero exception, but these are the .NET built-in exceptions, divide by zero exception, right? So in this case, you're dividing by zero, you're catching that, and you're just printing some lines out, right? Here's one. So in most cases, what you're going to be doing probably on a lot of these labs is you're going to be testing some of your fields, and if there's the scenario that it needs to throw an exception, you'll just go ahead and you'll throw an exception. Okay, in this case, you're throwing this invalid. So this is an invalid. So this is a .NET system exception, right? This is a .NET exception, operation exception. But so you can do the same thing with this as you do with your own. But in your case, you're going to create your new exceptions, right? And then you'll throw the exception, and then you're just going to go around right after you throw it. You're going to catch it right here. Okay. In a lot of cases, this really doesn't always make sense to do it this way, but for purposes of our labs and our assignments, this is what it's probably the easiest way, and without making things too complicated. So you throw your exception, and then you're catching that exact exception, and then you go ahead and do what you need to do here. In most cases, you're going to be setting your label and returning back to the screen to show your error message, right? But you just got to make sure when you throw something, you got to make sure you're going to catch it. It's got to be caught at some point. If not, your application blows up, right? So that's probably pretty much all I really want to show you here. Just, make sure when you throw your exception, you catch it. And this is where, in most of the cases, the new exceptions you create, you're going to go ahead when you catch it. This is where you go ahead and set your label, and you just want to return back to the screen, right? All right, so that was chapter 7. Let's look at the chapter 10 labs. So here's, I'm going to go through, obviously I'm going to lecture over 10 a little bit, and we're going to look at some examples. But, this is things to point out here. We're looking for, okay, well, drop down. There's a drop down, right? Drop down must be populated programmatically. So we're going to kind of look at that a little bit. When the user selects an option from the drop down, displays all available information about that superhero. Okay. And so that's a drop-down list. And then here, this is going to be a list box. So we're going to go ahead and look at a list box too. Must be populated programmatically. And then ListBox must allow multiple industries to be selected. So you can select multiple in a list box here, right? So we're going to also look at that. So we've got a list box, and we have a drop down, a list box, and here we are using TextBox. We got obviously a text box. Oh yeah, well here we're just doing some. We're demonstrating focus and keyboard and mouse events. So when you focus in a field, you use the keyboard. You can use the keyboard when you do something on a keyboard. That can change. You know, you based on that can change events. Right? You can click off events, and so we'll look at that. Here's a multi-search here. So, yeah, it's just kind of a continuation from the other labs here about what to use. And actually, I think the biggest thing here is search by first name. You know, things we've done before for the most part. When a student's not found, display an error message. All right, so we're going to display the error message. The user must be able to initiate a search by pressing the enter key. So we want to, that's when we press the enter key, so we need to trap that enter key. And then instead of hitting the search button, oh, well, there's no search button. Oh, it is search. But see, so the user must be able to initiate a search by pressing the enter button. Okay. So we'll take a look at that as well. All right. So I don't think these are bad either, as far as labs are concerned. You know, just some new controls, But once you understand a little bit how those new controls work, this shouldn't be too bad. All right. So let's go ahead and we're going to go ahead and go through chapter 10 here. So here's some different controls. ComboBox. In a ComboBox, you let the user select one or more items from a list of items. Okay. We'll look at examples of this. And then you've got ComboBox. So you select one from, remember ComboBox, you select one item. A list box, select an item from a list of items. The list portion of a list box is always visible. Okay. So we're going to look at how that's different. Radio buttons, we've already kind of worked on radio, we've already done radio buttons, but just a quick review. If you put your radio buttons in a group box, right, that's going to prevent, that's going to allow you just to select one of those radio buttons within that group. If you don't have it in a group box, then you can actually select multiple radio buttons. But really the purpose most of the time of radio buttons is you really just want to select one. Usually when you want to do multiple different ones, usually kind of use checkboxes. Checkboxes are better for that, selecting multiple. Checkboxes provide a way to present the user with choices that are not mutually exclusive. Okay. So here we're going to look at obviously radio buttons. This is within a group box. We have a built-in group box. And so you're going to either select one or the other. I think we've already kind of learned that in the last lab from last week, week 7. Here's a list box where you've got multiple. You've got multiple things you can select from, right? And so you kind of see all of them right there. Here you've got a combo box where when you click it, then you're going to be able to select the year. When you click them, that's when you see them, right? Here, you see all of them. You see the whole list of them, right? So a combo box lets the user select one option from a drop-down. So the combo box, you only select one from a drop-down list of items. A combo box can also let the user enter text into the text box portion of the combo box. So by entering that in there, it will kind of go to that one that matches that, right? A list box lets the user select one or more items from a list of items. So here you can actually select more than one, right? And we'll take a look at examples on that. Radio buttons let the user select one option from a group of options. Yes. A group box can group related controls. For example, it's common to place related radio buttons within a group box. Then the user can only select one of the radio buttons. A checkbox lets the user select or deselect an option. Right? Okay. So we're going to look at there's different properties for some of these different controls, right? So one property that only applies to a combo box is the drop down style. The default is drop down, which means the user can either click on the drop down arrow at the right side of the combo box to display the drop down list, or enter the value directly in the text portion of the combo box. Let's just go ahead and look at this. So here's common members of the ListBox and ComboBox controls. So these are common between both the ListBox and ComboBox. You have an index. So you have a selected index, selected item, text, sorted, okay, drop down style, selection mode. So these are all, obviously when you're within the Windows form, the designer, these will be there available. But then also, programmatically within your forms, you can also grab these as well, as we've done with other labs and exercises, that you can use these from within your code itself, right? And here you've got an event selected index changed and text changed. These are events, right? Common members of the items collection. Okay. So the items within the boxes, add, insert, remove. So yeah, you can, programmatically add things, insert, remove, based on your code. You may have one box that like let's say how the leap year, the days of the month can be different. So based on your year, you could have a leap year based on year, month, and it'll show the number of days. And you may programmatically, depending on what you selected, will show the days differently depending on, what if that's a leap year or not and how that days change, right? Just an example on that. Okay, code that loads a month. So you're showing a combo box. So if you created a combo box, here's a string array of months, and then the first thing you're starting out is select a month. So that's the first thing they'll see, and then you have your different months, right? And then this is how you programmatically build that combo box, right? So your combo box expiration month .items.add, you're looping through this array and you're adding this into your combo box. Your code that loads the years in the combo box. So same thing here. So this is a date, time, today, year. This is a utility method of date time where you can get today. So you date time today will get today, the date today, and then you .year will get you the year, right? And then here you're just you're taking the year, the current year, and you're adding 8 to it, and that's your end year here. And then here you've got, here's your combo box. You're adding the item, select a year. So it's just showing you how you're actually kind of different from this one where you actually include it, select a month within your array. I think that this is obviously a little better solution here to just add this at the beginning, then you loop through your years and add the year, right? And then so you've got your first selection and it's going to say select a year, right? And then after that, it's going to have all the different years. So you're programmatically building that combo box in both cases here, one for month and one for years. And here's just some examples of clearing out the items or adding new ones, And then if you want to, this is just showing you select the first item. Yeah. So programmatically you can actually, select the index. This is just selecting by doing this, you can do this in your code playing around. You could have a combo box and you just do, a list box here. And then you could do your selected index being 0. If you came back to the screen, that's the one that would be selected. If you change it to 1, it'd be the second one in the list, right? Etc. Statements that get information from a combo box. So selected item. So on your combo box, dot selected item will return which one, the index of the one, all right? Dot text, you can do dot text to get the text of that item. And then here you're doing expiration dot selected index as an int. Okay, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, grab a selected item, turning this into an int, and this will be your year value. Okay. That's because selected item would be a string, and so if you want store your year, if you want a integer for your value here, you need to cast this to an int, right? The selected item would be returning a string here, and so you need to cast this to an int. And then here you're doing dot items one. You're just grabbing a specific one at a certain location and doing a toString on that. Okay. Code that works with a combo box of names. Here you've got 3 different names here. And here you're adding each one. So you're dynamically building your combo box. Right? Here you're taking and inserting items.insert at 0. So you're adding Joel at the 0 index. Here you're removing the one at the 3rd index. That's just removing and selecting. Don't select an item. So yeah, just by there might be some cases where you want to, something could already be selected and you want it to default that back to not selected. You can just set that to -1 and that will make sure that there is no selected item for that, right? Okay, checkboxes and radio buttons. I'm not sure we're going to do much on this because we've kind of done this for the most part. I think, I don't know, I don't think we really did check changed. That's an event that basically based on clicking that, you can have that. There's an event called check change that you can call a method based on clicking that. I don't think we've done that, but just so I want to point that one out there. Obviously we did checked before, so we know which one was checked in our code. Default checked equals true. Code that checks the value of a radio button. Now this is just showing you if something's checked, you're calling another method, enable controls or disable controls. Code that gets the value of a checkbox. So we've done that before. I don't think there's anything new there for us. We've done tab order. Please try to make sure you do your tab order. I know everybody's in their lab. Your lab's hands-on test, if it says to do your tab order, make sure you do that. Okay, I don't think there's anything there. How to get information you need for using a control. We've already added the form to a project. We know how to add another form to a project. Yeah, so here we need to add, this is something you'll need. I know one of the assignments has you add a dialog box. This is just showing you how to add new item dialog box. And just to let you know, you can also add an existing form. If a form already exists, you can add an existing one as well as creating a new one. All right. I don't think there's too much more here I want to cover. Let's go ahead and look at, so that was your combo box, populating your combo box. Populating your combo box, make sure on your form that you're populating your combo box, so that when you load your form, it'll be there. All the options will be there. And let's look at a list. Let's see here. Let's look at TextBox events. So let's look at this one here. Let's go to the form. And so what this is doing here, there's different events that are tied to the text boxes here. You got two different text boxes. You notice I kind of hover over this. Nothing's going to happen. If I click on this, oh, well, we're in the wrong thing. We got to run it. But let me run it here. Right. So here. So if you notice, like coming up by default, here, let's run this again. By default, it's green here, right? If I click on it, it's changed to the background color of that, right? So let's look at that. I don't know why my thing sometimes does this. Here's text box 1. And then if we go ahead and go look at the events on this, so text changed. So if the text changes in here, right, it's going to call this method, right? The text changes. Let's see if we have any other in here. I thought there was something else in here. Text changed. So let's go look at the code real quick. So yeah, so basically what we're doing here, set up text box events. So you're setting up these different events, okay? So basically what you're doing here is basically a text box. When you click this, okay, when you click this, This is a lambda function, right? A lambda expression, right? And basically, you can just kind of get used to this. I know it's going to take a little bit of time, but we've done. I think I've seen some of the students have used them already. But here you're taking TextBox one background color, and it's basically if you click it, it's going to change that to light yellow. All right. When it gets focus, text one focus, it's going to change it to light green. All right, and then if focus out of it, it's going to turn it back to white. Okay. And then here's another one where you're basically doing a key down. So basically when you press your key down, right, it's going to, in this case, if the key code, right, equals the key up. So what we're doing here is just your up arrow. There's different keys, right? And so there are different keys. And what were we doing? We get up, right? I know that this can be a little bit. What I can do is actually show you where, here's your back, here's the letter B, here's the letter A, right? There's a lot of different ones in here. So obviously, I think for one of the labs, you're going to have to do if you hit the return key, right? So let's see what that is. I'm not even sure. Right here, click return. So if keys.return, right? So that's one of them. Here, what was this before? I think it was up, yeah. All right, so let's just take a quick look at this. So let's run this. So what we're gonna do is, we got TextBox 1, you're doing a click, got focus, lost focus. And if you click it, it's gonna change the background color. If it got focus, so when it gets focus, it's gonna be light green, all right? Lost focus, it'll be white. And then if you do a key down on the key up, so if you press your up arrow on your keyboard, it's going to put focus in that field. Okay, so let's go take a look at that. So by default, it's putting focus in that field, right? So it's got focus, right? So if you tab out of there, it lost focus, right? It lost focus, it's going to turn it white, right? If you clicked in there, when you click in there, it kind of puts focus in there, but then it also, first it puts focus in there, and then it kind of, kicks off that on-click event of that, right? So you're kind of doing both there in a way. When you click in here, you're actually kind of putting focus, so it's going to initially turn that green, and then it's going to turn yellow because it's going to do the got focus event first, then on click, right? So you've seen how it turned green real quick and then yellow. And then so if we've got focus here, and now we go ahead, we want to do this key down. So if we do the key down, so if we do the up arrow, it's going to put focus into that field, right? And as you notice here, yeah, got focus. So yeah, so the focus is always going to be green, right? The click is yellow. So that just put focus in there. That's one thing is when you're tabbing's only just going to put focus in the different fields, right? Now, if you're in this like second one, you click on this, you're actually doing two things. The first one is putting focus on it, and the second one's a click event. But when you just do this, right, it's just going to be the on focus, right? In this case, it's the green. So by clicking it, turned yellow there. Okay. And so, like I said, yeah, the up arrow, you can change this to anything. All right. Let's do this to return. Just real quick here. Return. Let's save that. Let's stop it and start it again. So if we're here, and then we tab down here. Now if I hit the return key, it's going to go back to that first field. Okay. So based on our logic here, we're putting focus, right? So obviously you could do different logic here depending on what you're doing. But this is how you do the key codes, right? So kind of keep that in mind. That's how to do a key code. And this is a kind of the shortest, easiest way to do an on-click event, a got focus and lost focus, right? And I think that'll help you with some of these labs because I think there's a lot of scenarios where you're going to do either a click or a focus or using, I think one of the labs asks you to do a return key. So that's how you do that, okay? Let's see what else here. So here's a list box. And so basically the, same thing, kind of what we did with the combo box is, after we initialize the component, we're going to populate the list box, right? So, maybe not in all cases you want to do that. Sometimes you dynamically create it based on, sometimes you could have a list box or a combo box that's there that, it might be disabled. That once you choose some other things, then you enable it and you might populate it differently based on some other controls within your form, right? So, but in this case, we're populating it when you just initially go into the form and you execute the form that it's going to populate the list box here, right? So here, let's go ahead and take a quick look at this. And so here you've got, for a list box, you've got all four of them. You're always going to see all your options, right? Now, if you just click on it, it's going to be that. If you hold down your control key, then you can select multiple, right? Now let's see what happens when we get rid of this. So I'm holding down I'm clicking on it, but now I'm holding down my control key and it only let you select one, right? So you have to make sure that you have this. If you want to be able to select multiple, you got to make sure you selection mode .multi extended. Okay, that way you can do multiple. Yeah, this is just creating a form, inline form here. Let's bring this back up and hit search. You've selected item 3. So that actually created another form. Just kind of putting the inline form, except, in most cases, it depends what you're doing. This is one way to do kind of I call it inline form. It's just basically you're creating a new little form within your code. Obviously, if you've got a complex type form, it's probably best to actually put that as a separate form. Over here in your over here in your directory structure, you want to probably include another form. But this is just creating a new form dynamically here, I guess, within I just call it inline form that you're creating it within your code, right? And search results with 300. Yeah, it's not really doing everything that it's stating here, but that's okay. So